Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. This is Don 151 and Mekkah,
Hey,
and we are presenting Chapter 6 of my Fire Emblem 6 Hard Mode 0% Girls playthrough.
Chapter 6 is a little different from the chapters before it in that it has the preparations menu, which is new and fleshy and stuff, and it's also very nice because it lets us pick which units to bring and which ones to leave behind. It lets us choose our positioning at the start of the chapter, and it lets us freely trade their weapons around, so we know who has what right away. But it is kind of a long segment, so why did you decide to include it?
Well, for a while I was trying to speedrun this game, and when you're speedrunning, you kind of have to show everything. So that's sort of like a carryover from, speedrunning habits. The point of showing the preparations menu is threefold. One, it lets us see exactly who we're bringing along to the chapter now that we have so many units. The second is that it allows us to see what is different compared to the previous chapter when it comes to unit inventories. Especially, for example, if a unit gets an item like a chest key or a door key that indicates he's going to go off after a door or a chest, or if he gets like a hammer or an armor slayer, that indicates that he's going to go off and try to assassinate some armor knights. And the third reason is just to kind of show what formation changes that we're going to make in order to optimize the first several turns. So for the viewer who doesn't really understand Japanese or doesn't really understand Fire Emblem that much, the preparations menu might seem a bit incomprehensible. But for any big changes, I mean, that's why we're here. We can sort of point them out to you.
One thing you might have seen in preparation menu is that Clarine got an iron bow, but then on turn 1 it became clear why that was the case, and that was because we have a new archer. Her name is Dorothy, and she needed a weapon, so we gave her that iron bow with that trade at the start of the chapter. Dorothy's nothing special, she's just bold with slightly better stats, but she only joined just now, so she's arguably worse. But she's going to do a thing or two in this chapter, but more interesting is her partner, Saul, the male cleric, and you will probably have a bit more to say about him.
Yeah, Saul is a very important character to this playthrough. He basically obsoletes Ellen entirely, and the reason why is because he joins with a better staff rank, with higher base stats, and at a higher base level. So it's easier for him to reach the point where he can use A-rank staffs, and there's one particular A-rank staff that's very important later on in the game. So for those reasons, Saul is going to become our primary staff user in this playthrough.
Alright, so this chapter is a little more relaxed than the last few tools for a couple of reasons. And because it's a little bit more relaxed and a little more tame, we have more time to do certain stuffs. And one of those stuffs is that Marcus has some time to use his axes and train his axe rank. And that means he has some opportunity to get to D-axes and use the hammer later on.
Yes, this is the first chapter in which the enemies don't have their doubled hard mode bonuses, so it provides a bit of a breather for us, although it's a short breather because the next chapter is actually pretty hard. Also, a lot of the enemies in this map are soldiers, and as we recall from chapter 3, soldiers are pretty bad in general, and Marcus either has no trouble one round KOing them outright like he just did, or leaving them with 1 or 2 HP like he did at the beginning of the map.
Well, another thing we have time for in this chapter that we didn't in previous chapters is that Chad finally has the chance to show off his lockpick skills. In chapter 3 there were a couple of chests, but we didn't have time to get them. And now we do, and we have to pick some chests because there's 8 in this chapter and we can only get some of them since we do have some extra time, but not all that much of it.
Right, of the 8 chests in this chapter, 5 of them are located on the right-hand side of the map, and that's the side of the map that we're trying to get to. Of the 3 other chests in this chapter, 2 that are on the left near where Deke is, those contain a total of just 8,000 in pure gold. The ones that Chad are going after, they contain 2,000 in pure gold, in addition to a goddess icon, which can be sold for 4,000 gold, a silver lance, and a killer axe. And the reason why we're going for the silver lance and killer axe is because they can't be bought at this point in the game, whereas anything else could be bought, so the money is comparatively a little less useful. Also, because the difference in the total amount of money that we obtain isn't very big. It's 8,000 versus 6,000. Now, in the top left-hand room in this map, there is a staff called the Unlock Staff, which we're going to ignore because that chest is guarded by a bunch of enemies, and the Unlock Staff also isn't very useful in this game.
One of the reasons we have so much time in this chapter is because there is a certain turn floor. We basically cannot really seize any sooner than that, since Rory needs to be in basically 3 places at once as fast as possible. On the top left there's a recruitable character for him, and then there's going to be another one all the way down in the map. that he needs to talk to that isn't going to join right now, but will join later, and then needs to go all the way up to the throne room again. So no matter how you slice it, there is a minimum turn count that we just cannot get below.
That's correct. The character in particular that sets this turn count floor, her name is Cass. She's a thief that's going to appear later on. She doesn't appear until turn 5, which means Roy can't talk to her until turn 6, and then that means that he can't seize until turn 7. But right here, he speaks to this NPC nomad. Her name is Sue. Stat-wise, she's not that great, because she joins at level 1, and her stats are comparatively pretty poor. But compared to someone like Alan or Lance, as he pointed out back in Chapter 4, nomads are like cavaliers except they use bows instead of swords or lances. So that means that Sue is a lot better at sniping at certain enemies across walls, for example, because she's a lot more accurate with her bow than Alan or Lance are with their javelins. But aside from that, she's not especially great.
No, and there's another reason not to use Sue besides her low stats, and that's because there's a route split in this game that involves the use of Sue and Shanna that we alluded to earlier, and now it's probably an okay time to explain what's going on in that regard.
Right, so a route split is essentially when the game decides based on certain criteria what set of chapters the player is going to go to for a certain period of the game. So this route split that we're talking about in particular, it's called like the Ilia Sacae route split. Basically, it occurs much later on, but how it's determined is based on the total amount of gained experience points that the Pegasus Knight units, in this case, that would include Shanna, and the Nomad units, which in this case would include Sue, have gained. And in general, the Ilia route is easier, so that means that we want our Pegasus Knights to gain more experience than our Nomads, which is why Shanna's getting all these kills, and Sue is going to see even less use than she normally would see.
Yeah, that's right. And while we're wrapping that up, we already kind of had an encounter with the boss, and Roy just recruited, between quotations, the thief. And now Roy's being rescue dropped all the way to the north, but he can't seize this turn since he already talked this turn, and he's being rescue dropped.
Cass's recruitment method is a little interesting. Roy has to talk to her 3 times over the course of the playthrough, and this is the first time that we get to talk to her. There are going to be a couple more times. Actually, there's a total of about 5 opportunities throughout the entire game, and we need to satisfy 3 of them. Now, we have a few reinforcements that just came in from the bottom of the map. These reinforcements are pretty interesting because they only appear after all the player units have crossed a certain vertical position in the map. So technically, we could have just not triggered them, but we did because that allows Dorothy to help feed the soldier killed Shanna for even more experience points going to her.
Yeah, and this also has to be the turn where we kill the boss, and he can be kind of tough because he has both 1 and 2 range since he's a shaman, and he hits on resistance, so that's double tough. And he's kind of fast. Rutger still doubles him, thankfully.
His defensive parameters are pretty poor, so we only need 1 single critical hit from Rutger to one-shot him. Of course, we can't actually 2-hit KO him, so we do need the critical hit. For some reason, though, this guy is pretty dodgy, not the least because of his throne bonus. But also he's a shaman, and shamans are mostly known for not being very dodgy. But in this game, because the dark tomes don't weigh very much compared to later games, they do... well, they're not spectacular in the avoid department, but they're not below average. So that's Chapter 6 completed in 7 turns. We will see you next time.
See ya.